Hello. Tonight I'd like to cover the Bundeswehr LKS webbing and the Canadian Pattern 82 webbing. I have the belts. This is the Bundeswehr LKS and this is the Canadian Pattern 82 along with the yoke. This here is the LKS and the Pattern 82. And I would like to do a little bit of conjecture and see which one came first or if they were developed together. I really think they're developed together. I can't find any information on this out there. Must exist, but we'll have a closer look and compare the two. For starters, we'll have a look at the lock on the buckle. The Canadian one has the center on it, and the Bundeswehr does not. The stitching is identical on both of these, maybe a little bit smaller on one, but it varies between belts. If we are to overlay these, the centers on the holes, if we can see that, are exactly the same, and the belt thickness is also exactly the same. The Bundeswehr is just a web. It does not have this nylon outer coating that the Canadian does. What's interesting is on the Bundeswehr, it has this divider in the clasp, which seems to serve no purpose other than to keep one of these from going in. And so I have a feeling that this is a patented piece or trademark piece, and in order to cut cost, they made it slightly different. Another large difference is the way the belt is attached to the yoke. The holes in the Bundeswehr LKS are larger in diameter than the Canadian holes, but again, they have the same pitch, so they do match up very well. Belt is the same width as I said. So really, these belts are virtually identical except for the way that they're held onto your yoke. Even more similarities are in the yokes themselves. This is the Canadian yoke, and this is the Bundeswehr. We have the same number of holes in both yokes, and they both have through slots, so you can just slide whatever you're going to put through the back. They're actually about the same size. The German one is obviously just the length of the grommets, and the the thick webbing is almost the same length, depending on your on which one you purchase. So the Canadian, of course, doesn't have the clasp at the front, but they do have the same setup, just slightly different attachment methods, but they're there, and they appear to be very, very similar. As a side example, we have these are two Canadian yokes, and I'll show you what the differences are. You can see over time they've changed from green, this is earlier, green to black, and some of this material has changed. But other than that, they're the same, unless you look on the inside. And this one should just say yoke on it. If there's any more wording, I can't see it. It just says yoke. And this one is yoke pad backpack. And of course they have different NATO stock numbers, and the different materials, even the color and the name, each one of those alone would be enough to change the NATO stock number. But even though they are named differently, they are identical items. After having a quick look at these and their similarities, what can we say about the Canadian and the German webbing sets? Well, the Canadian is obviously a 1982 initial issue, and the German one, I don't know when its year was, but it came out in about the early 90s. And the Canadian ones obviously saw widespread use by the early 90s. The German pouches will not fit on the Canadian one because the bosses that go through the grommets are too large of a diameter to go through the Canadian belt. But the Canadian pouches will fit on and stay on to a German belt, which means you can also use the yoke with the German belt, but not vice versa. The Canadian ones are well known for these grommets pulling out. The Canadian setup is probably more sturdy. It's certainly harder to get off, so if you were changing your equipment around all the time, the German setup is probably better for you. If you're going with one setup and not changing, the Canadian one is designed to never move. It was clearly designed for not wearing any body armor. If you look at Canadian soldiers wearing this stuff and wearing body armor, you can see that it's usually pulled up above the shoulders because it doesn't fit over it very well, and will probably get caught on a lot of things. I haven't heard any reports of that, but that is my suspicion. The German one obviously is designed around wearing body armor, so if you are into wearing body armor and changing your equipment around all the time, the German one is just fine. If you're never wearing any body armor, the Canadian one is probably what you want. Anyway, if there's anything you'd like me to examine, let me know and I'll try and find it for you.